The evolution of human thought has led to romanticism for the future. Future technologies, future ways of thinking, future hopes and dreams of peace, harmony, convenience, and utopia. The future is venerated as a continuous point of progress. Advancing technologies, ideologies, and philosophies will surely bring about prosperity. Modernism has taught us to break from our shackles of tradition and pioneer onwards towards a rational and logical future. Through dedication to individualism, capitalism, and progress, humans are sure to universally filter out subjective chaos to attain knowledge and enlightenment. Right? Instead, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner offers a different depiction of the future. A future that has instead reached postmodernity, a state rampant with a chaotic, fragmented absence of meaning. All of what modernism embraced has instead created a futuristic control society where high and low culture have synthesized, where mankind has already lived in a worn-out state of capitalistic progress, where meaning is not attained through subjective scrutiny, but instead chaotic critique. Blade Runner is Scott's attempt at encapsulating postmodernity in the cinematic medium. The tale of Rick Deckard, the Blade Runner, hunting down Roy Batty and his band of Nexus 6 replicants, ultimately blurs the line between human and android within the postmodernist style. Through implementing pastiche and quotation, depthless superficiality, and fragmented juxtaposed narratives, Blade Runner quintessentially forges itself to become an archetype of postmodernist art. Blade Runner creates a postmodern hyperreality through frequent usage of quotation. However, quotation is not bound by linguistic and vocal chains, as we believe.
I think, Sebastian, therefore I am.
It can manifest itself through visuals, sounds. It's not entirely direct, but sometimes a pastiche, an homage, a representation, or a reinterpretation. It's a reference of history, culture, pop culture, fiction, and non-fiction. Like Dada and Warhol, postmodernism creates a fusion of high and low culture. Some quotations are simple. Take, for example, this direct reference to Alien. Where some are more intricate and subtle, like the pastiche of Citizen Kane. This specific homage to Citizen Kane speaks to how it has influenced not just Blade Runner, but film in general. The high contrast lighting and camera angles pioneered hallmarks that would translate into film noir and film itself, which Blade Runner would implement into its neo-noir aesthetic and return full circle. The diegesis in Blade Runner permeates with quotation and reference within elements of its mise-en-scène and sound. To properly decorate the setting of Los Angeles in 2019, the dystopian, futuristic, and capitalistic world of the film is suffocated with props of neon signs, advertisements, and consumerist influence. Almost all open space within the metropolis is layered with the absolute bombardment of advertisements, both fictional and non-fictional. However, most of these have multicultural spins to them. The reason being is that the intention of the design of this future Los Angeles is a society of hierarchy, where various multicultural groups on the bottom merge together. We see Asian, Hispanic, European, all sort of collide together and create a melting pot, a mix in Blade Runner. Take, for example, this scene. Deckard, shaken from murdering Zora, the replicant, understandingly wants to purchase alcohol. Immediately, we see an Egyptian statue of a pharaoh and a Chinese dragon. We hear the city speak in the background. City speak is a multicultural mixture of Chinese, Japanese, Hungarian, Swedish, German, French. It's to represent how multicultural it really is in the lower city of 2019 LA. A Tsingtao, Deckard asks for, the most internationally prominent Chinese beer. Some might call it product placement, but as we see everywhere else in the film, the commercialism of our present carries on to this feature. And playing over all of this is the song One More Kiss Dear. Its 1930s melancholic cabaret sound not only sets the mood pretty well, but is intentional. In the original work print of the film, the song was originally supposed to be If I Didn't Care, the classic song by the African-American pop vocal band, The Ink Spots. Instead of directly using the song for whatever reason, Vangelis, the composer, created a pastiche of the signature Ink Spot sound. This is an example of postmodernist pastiche, which takes a referent, an original source from history or culture, and repurposes it, reimagines it, and reinterprets it. All of this reference to present, familiar pop culture and commercialism depicted in the future sends a message. A message that the capitalistic modernism that was once looked forward to will outlive us and grow, while our society, mindlessly feeding into it with hope, will decay as a result. Another example in particular that stands out from the rest is the geisha. Now, a geisha is primarily a Japanese hostess in makeup and a quotation of Japanese history and tradition. However, this advertisement constantly portrays it consuming what's supposed to be a birth control pill. This fusion of past and present follows Deckard throughout the narrative, manifesting itself on digital billboards, on blimps. It's a symbol for the postmodernist future of past and present. To quote David Harvey, eschewing the idea of progress, postmodernism abandons all sense of historical continuity and memory, while simultaneously developing an incredible ability to plunder history and absorb whatever it finds there as some aspect of the present. The advertisement is a synthesis of a historical Japanese referent repurposed to commercialize modern consumers' pharmaceuticals, destroying its historical context and becoming an epitome of postmodernism. However, its seemingly intrusive presence within Deckard's hunt for the replicants suggests that Deckard cannot escape the conditions of his postmodernist life. The geisha will follow him, just as the rampant dystopian capitalism and its consequences, the replicants, will forever trail his life within the future of Los Angeles. Another trait of postmodernism is the notion of superficiality. Traditional modernism has a doctrine of plundering subjectivity to find a universal truth. It indulges in the idea of basking in the depth of subjectivity to search for knowledge and enlightenment. However, postmodernism critiques that. Postmodernism instead illustrates truth based on the superficial. It cares not for the elitist, almost overly pretentious plunder for knowledge and relativity, but instead redirects focus onto what is at the surface. It claims that if one were to hopelessly search for truth and subjectivity, one could miss truth that appears on the surface, for truth that is obvious, but is lost in the search for something that isn't so obvious. It illustrates that perhaps a universal truth obtained through searching subjectivity is an oxymoron. We see this occur in the cinematography, sparingly but effectively. One could argue overall, because of the intricate locations, set designs, and constant usage of deep focus, that the superficial doesn't necessarily apply to Blade Runner cinematography. That is a valid point. However, we shouldn't be looking at the frequency, but instead the context in which a technique is used in, and what is vital to the narrative. As demonstrated in Roy Batty's confrontation with his maker, Dr. Tyrell, the simple technique of shallow focus is used to create a concentrated area of significance. Roy interestingly steps from out of and into the focus. In essence, the lack of focus within the scene is parallel to the lack of depth. The focus is centered solely on the two characters, leaving the backgrounds to be blurred and rendered insignificant to the interplay of the two. Just as there is no deeper focus, there is no deeper depth into the scene other than the one being presented. It is merely a prodigal son's act of defiance to his pretentious patriarch of a creator, similar to postmodernism's lack of depth as an act of defiance to modernism's pretentious subjectivity. However, what else do we see in this scene? Roy Batty's eyes. Now, these eyes are present on every single Nexus 6 replicant. It's meant to be a dead giveaway to the audience that someone is a replicant. Eyes in general becomes a recurring motif in Blade Runner. The motif of eyes can be interpreted in countless different ways. Eyes are traditionally thought to be the windows to the soul, that which being possibly a person's thoughts, intentions, and the story could be told through eyes. We see humans contain eyes, of which that have open pupils, almost like windows that take in light from the outside, but are also metaphorical gateways to the soul. Eyes are what allow us to visually take in our world and create memories with such.
If only you could see what I've seen with your eyes.
With that being said, why is it that the replicants have pupils that illuminate light instead of taking it in? Why is it that these pupils are less of a window and more of a mirror instead? Why have this obvious distinction be made from human and replicant if the entire point of the story is to show how the two are almost the same? Maybe these replicant eyes parallel to that of postmodernist thinking, rather than searching for meaning inside depths and realms of subjectivity, reject it. Embrace the ironic absence of meaning. It acknowledges that perhaps because there is no meaning inside us as humans, that perhaps we should find meaning on the surface of who we are. These eyes are saying that just because these replicants inhabit post-human bodies, it doesn't mean that their consciousness is not that of a human being. Maybe it's useless to look for whether or not someone is human in their memories in a world where memories can be fabricated. Maybe that the key to being human is for the ability to learn and develop emotions and empathy. What's interesting about the narrative structure within Blade Runner is that it's split and juxtaposed into fragments. Throughout the narrative, there are two main polarized fragments of identity, as opposed to a single identifiable protagonist. Instead, there is a constant conflict between the two sides of human and replicant. The portrayal of humans serves as the audience's initial point of identification, and conversely, the replicants are vilified to be violent, apathetic murderers. However, these roles become reversed throughout the narrative, as it's revealed that Deckard is a cold and ruthless murderer under obligation to his occupation, whereas the replicants act out in their violent tendencies because of their immature emotional development and dying urge for a longer lifespan. This falls in line with the postmodernist embrace of juxtaposition and fragmentation. This reoccurring juxtaposition progressively makes it harder to distinguish what is human and replicant, culminating in Roy sparing and rescuing Deckard from death and his acceptance for his flawed fate. Despite being artificial, replicants can truly attain empathy, emotion, and the traits that set human minds apart from others. With the lines of human and replicant blurred at the conclusion of the film, the polarity of the two is shattered, breaking off into more spheres of fragmentation. Deckard proves that human beings can descend into a ruthless path of apathy and murder, whereas Batty proves that replicants can ascend to empathy and emotion. There is no divide between human nor replicant, like how there is no more of a divide between hero nor villain within this fragmented story. We also hear this in the soundtrack. Vangelis's haunting soundtrack is a simultaneous melodic and chaotic fusion of synthesizers and instruments. Electronics with string, brass, and percussion, future and past, low and high culture are all rendered seamless. Memories of Green, one of the most quintessentially beautiful piano pieces, is shattered by constant echoes and ripples of synths and electronic noises, jarringly replicating Rachel's fragmentation of her own identity after she realizes her memories and her entire life were simply false. Whether it be Blade Runner Blues, Love Theme, or any other Vangelis composition in this film, this style permeates throughout. It's symbolic for the fusion of and conflict between machine and organic. However, these radically different shards of sound don't create a cacophony, but instead a harmony. A harmony that on paper would seem to be a discombobulated mess, but is instead beautiful. Instead of trying to create the most clearest rational sound to find vision, the soundtrack is a deliberate adoption of this mess. in order to find clarity in the chaos. If you were to listen to the soundtrack, where either aspect is without the other, it won't feel just quite right.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
The significance of Blade Runner's depiction of postmodernity is what it teaches us about human ways of thinking. 2019 Los Angeles is very much a postmodernist society, but so is ours as well. Now, 2019 Los Angeles is rampant with post-human replicants that blur the lines between technological and biological, but the similarity we see is not in the replicants, not quite yet, but instead the humans. The humans we see don't advance nor evolve their ways of thinking to accommodate their surroundings. Their traditional notions of what constitutes as humanity is challenged by the replicants, and because of such they fear for the progress of the future, despite being in the dystopian universe. In many aspects, the future of 2019 LA is already our present. Surrounding us are postmodernist inhabitants that either hold on to tradition without any regard for the future, or look blindly to progress, disregarding the lessons of the past. Blade Runner is teaching us that either extreme without the other is an obstruction to understanding where we are at now. Similar to how the replicants synthesize the organic and artificial, postmodernity is about fusing past and future to survive our present. What I love about Blade Runner is how open to interpretation it really is. A postmodernist critique of modernism states that subjectivity and a single unanimous truth cannot coexist. Subjectivity fragments every individual's experience into their own, making everything we know to become relative. And just as it is with postmodernism, Blade Runner can be interpreted in so many various ways. It is the perfect allegory of postmodernity.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears.